Welcome everyone to the stream. Haven't seen you in about a month since the gravestone stream, but today we're going to be kind of continuing this theme of like fall, autumn, the time period that we're in, with this lantern scene. I tried to come up with a 2-hour project that kind of represented fall in a way to me, and where I'm from, you know, this kind of sunset pond that's in the forest. With a very blue kind of cold undertone to the colors, with a very bright warm lantern, I thought fit the theme. So also, technically speaking, for modeling, it's about a beginner to intermediate level modeling exercise, but it's heavily dependent on modifiers. So if you're wanting to learn to be more efficient with modifiers and how to input the least amount for getting the max amount of output, this is going to be a fun exercise for you. And then once we get into the shading and lighting of this scene, it gets a little more complex since we're going to be in the node editor and trying to get a photorealistic result. But yeah, it should be a fun 2-hour project. Welcome everybody. Chats seems to be hopping with people showing up and saying hello. Welcome. Without any further delay, I suppose we can just hop right on in. All right, I am using Blender 2.81, though I don't think anything is particularly special with the workflow in 2.81. I've just been kind of using that one as my own personal workflow. So that's what I'm using. And let's start from scratch. I'm going to go to the modeling layout, modeling workspace, and I don't want the camera or the light, so we'll just get rid of those. Standard practice. We will start from the cube, and I've done this project a couple times now, so I'm going to keep the proportions the same so it looks as close as possible to the original, which I will go ahead and load up. I'm splitting my user interface, and do I have screencast keys? Let me turn that on. There we go. There we go. And let me load up by switching this bottom panel into an image editor, and we will load our image. Oh wait, I've already got it loaded, sorry. There we go. So we'll leave this in the bottom corner so we can get an idea of what we're shooting for. Move this offset a little bit to the left. Okay. So I know that I want this to be sitting on the floor. This is the default cube. I'm going to tab into edit mode, GZ, and move up 1 unit by hitting 1 on the number pad. And then I'm going to tab back to object mode. And for the item dimensions, I want the Z to be 2.9 meters. Now I want to build this to scale just because I think it's a good practice, although I do it a lot less than I probably should. But with that set, I am going to switch my units then over to go to the scene tab, and we're going to use imperial units just because that's what I'm used to, being in America, the weird country that still uses imperial. And I'm going to switch the length to inches. All right, so I'm guesstimating that a lantern this size is about 10 inches. So I will scale using the S key until I see the dimension of 114 inches. It's a pretty massive default cube. We're going to scale that down until I see 10. And I can hold shift until I to make the increments less. So now we've got kind of the bounding box of what our lantern is going to be. I'm going to hit Control A to apply the scale. And this I will rename to be ref underscore, let's just say lowercase ref cube. And then I'm going to duplicate this and immediately rename that cube to be lantern underscore base. All right, now I go back to the ref cube, and for a reference object like this, I like to go to object settings and change the viewport visibility to be display as wireframe. And yeah, it's crazy that I'm not actually deleting the default cube. I know. It happens rarely. So we've got that set to what I just set it to wireframe. This way, it won't get in the way of my other models. It's just going to be a measurement reference. And then I can also turn off selection since I won't need that anymore. So I need to enable that restriction toggle by clicking that here in the outliner. So we can turn off selection, and now I won't have to worry about that getting in the way. Okay, so I've got my scene set up. We're going to have very similar dimensions to my original lantern. Maybe the font for screencast keys is a little too big. Let's go to like 20. It's a little better. And so for the base, this is the decorative piece at the bottom. Let's tab into edit mode and then hit 3 on the number keys above our letters. And that is going to be face mode. I can drag that top face down till I get a base height that's similar to our reference. Now, this is where we can start to put on our modeling glasses, our modeling perspective, and imagine how can we create this for the least amount of effort. Where can we duplicate? Where can we mirror? Can we use an array modifier? I'm just painting a picture that telling you exactly what we're going to be doing. And yes, if you look at this image and we maximize it, you start to analyze it in a modeling context, and you can start to realize that the only unique part of this base is 1/4 of the 1/2 of the size. So like a quarter of the overall cube. All right, this section right here, we can, I probably shouldn't have highlighted that one. Let's do the other one because we're actually going to be doing this side. Right here, if we model this, we can use our modifiers intelligently and get the entire thing for free. Let Blender do that work for us. So that is what we're going to set up now. Let's go back to our other view. And I'm going to cut this into quadrants. All right, so cut in half this way, cut in half this way. And then I can delete everything. Let's see, that's not, let me just do it with faces. Control I to invert, delete faces. So this is the only thing, actually we can even go lower. We can split this diagonally. So does that work? Nope. Let's try that again. Just one at a time. So select 2 verts, J to join an edge between, and then we can delete these other verts. All right, so this is the piece of the square pie that we can then rotate all the way around, duplicate and rotate. I'm missing a question. Let me go find that. Should we start following in Blender? You're welcome to. So Sudeep, this is I believe it's your first stream. It's never the like expectation that you follow along, but if you want to, absolutely. This is going to be a particularly good stream topic to follow along if you would like to. So since there's no source files to download or anything, I'll be doing all of that as we go as far as textures and things. But yeah, you're welcome to. I'll go ahead and save. I see a nice warning from the save police. So save as, let's call this Rec Lantern 01. 01 save. All right. Oh yeah, Sudeep, there is, you can see Omar, he got that blue question tag. The way you achieve that is by typing 2 brackets, your square brackets, and then a capital letter Q in the middle of those brackets, followed by whatever your question is. That will make that tag appear, which is easier for me to spot in the list of in the chat list. All right, so we have created this pie, this piece of the square pie, and then if we go to the modifiers, let's set up how we can duplicate this around. First, we want to add a mirror modifier because that will get us the other half for free, which brings up another point. When modeling in Blender, when setting out to model, Blender sort of expects that your front to back of your model is going to be the green axis, that is the y-axis, and your left to right of the model is going to be the red axis. Also, it's important to put your model in the center of the model directly in the center of the world, which is where the 3 axes, actually, the Z is hidden, but these axes cross in the middle, the origin of the world. So because I've set up, the default cube is already set up that way, and I've continued to adhere to that structure, the mirror modifier has X on by default, and it does exactly what I want to do. So that's kind of important. In other words, there are some tools in Blender that wouldn't make sense if you're modeling out here in space for no real reason. So it's important to, it's more intuitive if you do it this way. Which makes sense. I mean, I've never known a modeler to ever like inherently want to model off of the axis, off of the specific axis. Sometimes you'll see people model, you know, where X is front to back and Y is left to right. But most of the time, this is the best way to set it up. And now that we've got the first modifier in play, make sure that it is merging, which it is, enable clipping, and then we can do another modifier that duplicates it around like in a circle basically. So we can add an array modifier, and that's how we're going to do that. Now by default, you only get transformative, I guess, location transforms. So you can increase how the array modifier duplicates. And so you can add as many duplicates as you want. We're going to need 3 because that's the remaining sides of the square that are left. So we need, is that really 3? Count. Oh, okay, I need 4. So it includes the original in that count. So we don't actually want to translate the duplicates at all. So we can turn that off, and instead we can use an object to rotate our duplicates around. And we need essentially another object for us to rotate and be like a utility. So we can add, typically you'll see people add an empty for this purpose. So Shift A to bring up the add menu and choose empty, plane axes, and that will be added to the center of the world wherever the cursor is at. And I can then, let's name this intuitively. It's going to be utility, UTIL, what is it called? Array spin, let's say. And then if I select the object with the array modifier and then choose the eyedropper tool, I can select that utility array spin and also enable object offset. You have to turn that on or else it won't work. Now if I rotate this object, you'll see our duplicates start to rotate. And then I just need to rotate 90 degrees perfectly, which I can do with hitting 90 on the number pad. And now we've got our 4 sides with which we can just edit this one corner. All right, so this is an example of how powerful modifiers can be, limiting the amount of work you have to do and still getting a perfect result. Would it make sense or wise to add the candle right away and use that as a rotation point? Again, a newbie to all this, so may not make sense at all. No. So the way that I was going to add the candle, it actually, I'm not going to model the candle from scratch. It's an asset that came from a previous live stream from like 2015, and it was a candle. So like there's a whole live stream about sculpting that, but I'm going to use that and import it or append it into this scene. So I've already got that, but no, I don't necessarily see like needing to have that candle right away. I kind of approach this as like building the lantern and then putting the candle inside of it. That's just how my mind works, but that is not necessarily the only correct way to do it. Part of the beauty of modeling is there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So if that's what makes sense in your head, then absolutely go with it. It's potato kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, to sculpt that candle kind of takes a long time, so that's why I'm going to be appending it. But if you want to see how that's done, I'll point you to that live stream once we get there. Yeah, you can use any object as the spin point. True. So like, yeah, I see what you mean. If you wanted to have your candle be that spin object, you could do that. Only problem is, you'll see once I import the candle, it is important which way that candle is pointed, because only like 1/2 of the candle is sculpted correctly. So I'm going to make that half face the camera. And if that angle of rotation doesn't match with the array modifier, what I need for that, then it kind of, is a pointless thing. But it's not uncommon to use these sort of utility objects and then just kind of hide them whenever you don't need them. So let me go ahead and do that. The ref cube and our, let's see, utility array spin. I can move that to a new collection with the, what is it? Is it the M? Yeah, okay. The M key brings up the move to a new collection, and we can call this utility. And utility essentially means things that help me model, but I don't ever want to see in the end. And so at any point we can just turn it off, but collect them all in here, is going to make sense. And then for the original collection, I guess we can say that this will be the lantern, and all our lantern pieces will go there. Okay. So we have set up the modifiers, but it's still not the model we want. We need to actually edit this to represent the design that we see. So I'm going to go into my one orthographic view and then wireframe, and I'm just going to cut this shape with the K knife tool. So hit the K key, and then I'm going to just draw this shape, creating ingons and whatever I need to. But I'm keeping fairly even, vertices. And that's going to be pretty close. Then I can delete this needless vertex down here. And so now we're starting to see, I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the utility. You can see that we have that shape duplicated around, which is great. However, this is going to be photorealistic, or we're going to try and make it photorealistic. So leaving it a low poly like this is not going to cut it for photorealism. We need to add a Subsurf modifier to smooth things out. So I do need to add subdivision surface. And in case you don't know, you do have a hotkey. If you hit Control 1, 2, 3, or 4, or I think all the numbers, it will add a Subsurf modifier, and the number is how many levels you want it at. So I'm going to hit Control 2, and that will add two subdivisions to our Subsurf modifier. And clearly, this is not what we want. There's a couple problems. Number one is if we go back to the array modifier, another benefit of the array modifier is that we can enable merging, so that our vertices, whenever they're over top of each other, from the duplicates, you can merge them automatically. And I think, let me turn off Subsurf. I think I need to adjust the array, the merge distance. I think it's like 0.01 inches maybe. But you can't really tell until we have the Subsurf enabled, so I might have to revisit that setting. However, once we see it subsurfed, the next problem that it presents is we need holding edges, because it just takes very much, it's like if you took a square kind of piece of clay, if you can imagine cutting a square clay, rolling it in your hands, that's what the modifier is doing. But if we add holding edges, it will reinforce the structure so that it still smooths but maintains however much you want that structure to maintain. So let me just stop trying to describe it and actually do it. Let's turn off Subsurf. And first thing to do, I think, is probably connect the vertices here that are just creating this massive ingon. And let's connect it to the point in the middle with by selecting the two, hitting J. That will connect kind of the shortest path edges. Control, or just J. J, and then this last one I'll connect over here. And it's okay that all these are triangles up top. That isn't really going to matter since it's a purely flat surface. Now you may notice that my clipping plane is kind of out of whack because Blender's default scene expects a bigger object, like the size of a human kind of thing. So because we have changed our object to be life size and it's a small object, I need to change the clip start to be like 0.5 inches. All right, so now I can get closer to the model before it starts to disappear. All right, so back to the holding edges situation. Let's see, let's cut an edge this way with Control R. And then whenever you're moving your edge to the side that you want, you can hit E, and that will align it to one side of the edge loop or the other. All right, so now I'm aligning to the sharp edge that I want, but you can also hit F, and that will go according to the other edge, which is a pretty cool feature. Let's see, F, okay. And I guess E enables that feature, and then F switches which side of the edge loop you want. All right, so we've got an edge started, and that's going to be good for the top, this top edge, but we need another one. So let's just cut. Since I've got triangles, I can't really use edge loop cut. Let's use Control K instead. Let's see here. Hold on, I'm checking something. And yeah, so K, I'm sorry, it's not Control K, it's just K. And I can just cut a straight edge right to there. All right, trying to keep it really close here. These additional edges, if you're new to Subsurf modeling, is what will reinforce the shape as it gets smoothed. All right, and then I need to join these two. K, cut here. Let's get rid of that middle edge. Control R, and then do that E trick so that it's very flat according to the other surface. And then finally Control R, E again, and drag it really close to that bottom edge, that decorative edge that we added. And then I forget how I did this. I think I just cut kind of another edge right there. Because whenever you've got a point like this, you need holding edges on either side. I need one here, and then it'll also be here since it's a mirror modifier. So I need it to be really close. And it's okay that I have a triangle here. That's really going to be fine. I mean, if you were really wanted to be specific about it, you could add another edge right there and then move it, Shift Y. There we go. That's if you wanted to be, if you gave into your modeling OCD, which all modelers have, I'm pretty sure. So there's no judgment here. G, Shift Y. I'm just kind of evening out this edge a little bit better. Anything that I'm missing? I don't think so. I think this takes care of all my holding edges. And if I right click, Shade Smooth in object mode, and then enable Subsurface, there we go. That looks great, except for the top. But you can see that it still smooths out. Save Police. Thank you. Control S. Thank you, Omar. Or anyone else who might have mentioned that. Make sure I'm not missing any questions real quick. Okay, good. So you can see that the Subsurf modifier still smooths this object, but it's more realistic because like in a stamped metal kind of shape that this is, you're still going to have a little bit of smoothness. It's not going to be razor sharp like this. The razor sharp surfaces, if I shade flat, that doesn't really exist much in real life. Though I did see a tweet recently of like a perfectly engineered, it was like a 3D puzzle piece that was a square that had like the connection had all these, weird contours. But when you put it together, you literally could not see the seam. So that's like as close to 3D modeling as I've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen that tweet before. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, we've added our Subsurf modifier. Because of the holding edges, we now have much more realistic surface quality to the model, but we do have this horrible eyesore, and that is actually in the array modifier. We're not merging the first and last objects in the array. So this side and this side are not being merged. So let's enable that and it goes away. And we've got a great model that represents what we see in the original, all right, with the least amount of work. Again, if you were trying to model this all the way around, there's a couple ways to do it, but I think this is probably the most efficient way to do it. The only modifier we need to add still is to give it some thickness, all right? Right now it's paper thin, and that's not going to be accurate. We need a little bit of metal thickness to be realistic. So let's add the Solidify Modifier, and I'm going to add that above. I'm going to move it above the Subsurf Modifier so that it still smooths out what we solidify. And then I can shift and drag down the thickness. And I'm just going to ballpark this. It is going to be thin metal, but I think just a little bit thicker, maybe 0.1. Yeah, maybe 0.1 will be good. All right. Excellent. How the saying goes, work harder, work smarter, not harder. I think you got that backwards, Omar. Yeah, there you go. All right, so we've got, also, if anyone's new, I know we have a couple new people, don't hesitate to ask questions. That is part of the beauty of this format, the live streaming, that when you see something that, hey, I didn't understand that, you can ask it and I can answer it for you. So do not hesitate. Welcome, noobs. Yeah, true. Control S, we're saving it. Now, we've got this original object created, and we're going to build pretty much everything in the lantern off of that modifier stack. So this means that we can duplicate the object, and I'm going to immediately, without transforming it at all, I'm going to rename that to be lantern frame so we can start building the second part of the lantern. So the reason you duplicate it is it brings along those modifiers that are already set up. That is, kind of a medium complexity modifier stack, so I don't want to have to do that manually each time. And from here, I can also tab into edit mode, and I'm going to just take two vertices that are connected as an edge, Shift D to duplicate and move that up. All right, so now this is kind of the building blocks of what the piece will become. I can invert the selection with Control I and then X to remove everything else. All right, so this leaves us with these edges. You can see they're little duplicates. Hopefully, if I scale it up a little bit more, you should be able to see them. And I'm going to disable Solidify for now and just focus on these four corners. All right, so we're building the frame, and I am going to start in the by hitting 7 on the number pad to go to the top view, and then we can scale according to the 3D 3D cursor. All right, so I'm going to switch my pivot point to be 3D cursor, and we can scale, and that will, let's see, if I move to wireframe, you still can't see the other sides, but I'm trying to get the inset amount that we see here, where the frame kind of comes in, the base extends outward. So I'm scaling that in. That looks about right. And then from the front view, I can move that down. And let me just get an idea. So the frame that I'm talking about is this structure here. All right, so the square that goes along this way. That's what I'm going to build. And we're going to have to do something a little bit different for the cross section. But let's drag up the height of the frame and show our utility object, drag that up. And then I can snap it to the height of the reference box. So the snapping options are up here. By default, it's set to increment. I can choose vertex instead, and then G, Z, and hold Control, and that will snap up there. So it has the proper height. Then I can hit A to select everything, EX, all right, and that will create the thickness of our frame. I'm sorry, the width of the frame piece. And because we have the modifiers enabled, if I turn off Subsurf, we're getting the corners, all of the corners for free. Looks like I missed a question from Karen. Ever thought about doing a cornucopia? I'd love to learn how to make a scene with one for holidays. So let me remember what a cornucopia is. Oh, I should do that so you guys can see too. I think a cornucopia is like a collection of plants, but I'm feeling like I could be wrong about that. So let me see. Cornucopia. And oh, okay. So yeah, it's like it's specifically, I guess that reminds me of Thanksgiving, like that wicker basket shape with stuff coming out of it. Is that what you mean? A horn-shaped basket then? I guess that's what a cornucopia is. I never knew that that's exactly what it was. Learn something new every day. Yeah, so basically the task being like how to model that shape and incorporate the weave of the structure, I guess. That would be that'd be a good challenge. That's a good suggestion. Thanks for suggesting that. I will have to think that one through. Off the top of my head, it does seem complex, but maybe it's not as much as I thought initially. Good suggestion, Karen. And okay, so back to the frame. We've got the structure started out, and you can see that when we add a Solidify modifier, it's going to work perfectly for us. But to get the next section, if we look closely at our original, you can see that we're trying to create this as if we were building it in real life. And so in real life, this thing it's built in sections that are connected or welded together. So we've got a bar going up vertically and then a separate bar that goes horizontally at the top and the bottom. And then the cross section is also separate pieces. And just in manufacturing, like you see that, it's common to see construction lines like that. So we are going to mimic that. I will duplicate two of these edges, Shift D, two of these verts, I'm sorry, so that they still maintain the same width, and then R90, but I don't want to rotate using the cursor. Let's just use the center of our selection. And then I can also snap it there by holding Control while I'm moving. So EX, let's move that to the center. We've got the top bar, Shift D to duplicate and move that down. And if we get really close, you can see that these are not actually touching the bottom surface. So let's make sure they do. A little bit of intersection is fine, but for being realistic, I used to just, whenever I would do this, for some reason, it's like, well, intersecting is fine because it's just okay to do that. So like you can push it through like this, but when it comes to realistic modeling, surfaces don't do that in reality. So it's actually important that you make them touch, maybe intersect slightly so that you don't risk a gap. But you want to keep them pretty close. That'll be much more believable, much more real life. All right, so that's the structure. I just need to remember to add holding edges. All right, so this is going to be done really easy with rectangular structures like this. So I'm just cutting edges, making sure that this will, keep this nice and tight. And the closer you move this edge to the end, the sharper it will be. Okay, with those cut, now I should be able to enable subsurface. And so here's what I'm talking about. Even though in its base model, these edges are right on top of each other, when we add the smoothing, a gap starts to form. So you need to be aware of that, because if the light shows through this gap, it's going to ruin some of the illusion. It's not a huge problem, but it definitely can ruin that illusion. And so I think a part of the problem here is that the Subsurf modifier has a very long distance to smooth out the topology. So I'm going to cut like a secondary support edge and move it up like this. So Control R, and that will actually make the smoothing. If we undo that, can you see? All right, yeah, so look right here. You can see what that does. So this is without the secondary edge, and this is with. It just kind of tightens the shape a bit. All right, so that's working with the subdivision surface modifier. And then when we add solidify, that works as well. However, you can see that the solidify modifier is going the opposite way. I sort of want this to go in rather than out, or do I? Let's see what it looks like going in. I can just reverse. Let's see, how can I? It actually has two parts. All right, so the solidify modifier, you can control which way the offset goes. By default, it's going -1. So -1 should be inside. However, it's going outside, which means the object has reversed normals. And you can see what you can visualize this in the overlay dropdown for the viewport and turn on face orientation. So whatever is red, that's supposed to be the inside face. Blue is outside. So I need to tab into edit mode just to make this a proper model. Even though you can do that, like, it's just not proper, I guess. You don't want, it's kind of like if your clothing was inside out. It's like you can wear your clothes inside out, but it's not how they were designed, I guess. So I'm going to hit, with those selected in edit mode, shift in, and reverse those. Now when we apply the solidify modifier, for one, the solidify modifier means it kind of encapsulates the thickness, so you don't see the red anymore. I think that would have been true even if we reversed. Sorry, I'm just curious if that's true. Inside. Yeah, so even if it's inside or it flipped, the solidify modifier is going to correct that. But you can see it has a direct effect on which way the thickness goes. Sorry, I'm spending a lot of time trying to talk about this. All right, so now that we have our normals correctly oriented, I do want the thickness going inside rather than outside, which is also good because when I tab into edit mode, you can see what we're editing. If it was the other way, it's harder to see because the thickness is blocking it. So we can turn off that face orientation overlay. All right, so now we've got the frame established. Maybe I should make it a little bit thicker. So in the solidify modifier, let's increase that size. Also, let's use even thickness and high quality normals. Now, something to kind of bring up is the fact that whenever you have a perfect 90-degree angle, as these shapes are, and then you start to solidify them inwards, you're going to get kind of an intersection of those faces. So it's not really that big of a deal in this case, but if I don't want that to happen, then I will make it thick the other way. All right, so I will make it go outwards. And if you want to do that, you get a bit of a softer edge on the external corner, but you can kind of split the difference, go 0.5. You have options, basically. And that's going to be fine. So either way you want to do that, just remember that now in edit mode, I'm not going to be able to edit that properly. So I'm kind of describing like what you have to deal with when modeling, things to keep in mind. So this is actually probably the best final result. And next, I can get rid of that utility. I probably don't need the ref cube anymore at all, but let's just hide that whole thing. We've got the outer frame established. Now let's work on the crossbars. No more questions. Make sure I'm not missing any. Good deal. Looks like there was another vote for yes to the cornucopia. Definitely a topic I should look into and see about creating and teaching that. I'm going to save the scene. The crossbars, yes. So the problem with the crossbars is we cannot use a mirror modifier. So we need to remove that because, you know, thinking about how this is constructed in real life, you've got two pieces that are crossing rather than one piece altogether. And you can see the seam right here in the middle. So one piece extends all the way from corner to corner, and the other piece is split in half, basically. So that means we to achieve that, we cannot use the mirror modifier. So let's duplicate this object, Shift D, and call it frame crossbar bars, and we'll remove the mirror modifier. Okay, so right away you can see what that leaves us with, and we can use that thickness. So I'm going to select two verts, and then let's see. Yeah, I'm just going to do that. Duplicate them and move them down in Z. Control I to invert selection and delete the excess. All right. So now I've got this object. I'm going to E extrude really wide to either really long, basically longer than the span from this corner to that corner. All right. Once I do that, I can rotate, line it up. I hope this is long enough. Okay, it's just going to be long enough. And now I'm going to eyeball where the center of this bar ends up in the corner, up in the top, and also in the bottom. Now, if you get one corner, let's hit Shift and then right-click right there at the corner, and we can temporarily use our 3D cursor as a rotation point, and then easily get the other side lined up as well. Control S to save. Thank you, Save Police. And let's see. You can see both the base mesh and the smooth visualization at the same time, which can be useful, but can also get in your way. I'm going to turn that off temporarily. Solidify, also turn that off just while I focus on the base and the base mesh. So next, what I need to do is Control R to cut an edge down the center, and then K to cut edges this way. All right, this is going to create our corner. And I'm actually going to undo that deletion, and G twice to slide that vert along the edge. So GG, and then get that really, really close to the corner. Here I'm going to eyeball it. And then here, GG to slide. The reason I'm sliding is I want to maintain that thickness as accurately as I can. All right, we've got that corner. Let's do the same down here. That is the K knife tool. Oh, I don't want to delete those quite yet. Actually got really close down here. GG to slide that. There we go. All right, so this is the long crossbar. Even though it looks like it's being mirrored, that's actually just the array modifier that's moving them around the circumference. Let's go back to 1. If we don't want to see that, we can turn the array modifier off in the viewport. And yeah, so I need to cut some holding edges down here. I'm hitting Control R, and that is putting an edge way in the middle. Let's hit that E key to make sure that it's really close to this other edge, this other corner. And then all I need is K to cut holding edges for that corner, just like this. To keep it quads, let's remove that edge and disable dissolve verts. That will leave me a quad down there. Do the same thing up top. Control R. Now I want to be really close to the top, but you can see that I had to move my mouse a ton to get the edge that cuts in the center of the mesh all the way up to the corner that I want. So that's why that was a little awkward. So E and F to make sure that matches this particular corner. K, cut the edge loops. Cut the corner support edges. Control X, disable dissolve verts. I feel like that disable verts, it used to remember that setting, whatever the last one you used was, but now it seems I have to press that every time. All right, so that cursor has done its job. Shift C to move that back to the center of the world, and then I just need an edge this way and this way. All right, now we should be able to smooth this. Though the lesson we learned with the long span over here is it's good to add a secondary holding edge, which I will do. Maybe add one in the center. You don't have to do this, but sometimes I like to keep it a little more even. So maybe cut a few this way, just so that you don't have any overly long stretched polygons. But I don't know, this is sort of that OCD modeler stuff I was talking about. All right, so we've, actually I might not do that for this case, because now that we've got that, let's just double check that it works with smoothing. So enable all these modifiers again. All right, that does look pretty good. How does it look like? Does it form any gaps? Okay, it does seem to form slight gaps. All right, so let's tab into edit mode and just push these to where they slightly intersect. All right, I just want to make sure we don't have these gaps that kind of potentially could ruin believability. All right, Control S to save. From Panboy, you don't set your blenders to autosave every 2 minutes. I use whatever the default autosave is because I let's see, maybe I don't. Control Alt, no, that doesn't work anymore. Edit preferences. Save and load. Save versions. Autosave temporary files every 2 minutes. I do that, but it's just it's not a great idea to depend on this because, you know, things go wrong sometimes, and it's best to be safe in that you save your own file incrementally so you're in control of that. And then if that doesn't go right, if something goes wrong, Blender crashes, as a second resort, you can go find the temporary save files. So I actually like the default and how that's kind of set up. All right, so yeah, I do want to make this thinner because I want to make this fit within. Okay, we got some funky stuff happening. Let's okay, that's the offset. What if I make it 1? How about -1? Looks like we got the same problem again, where if we turn on face orientation, so these are reversed. So Shift in, flip those around, and now Solidify should work fine. Let's take down the thickness a bit. All right, I want them fitting again within the thickness. You can kind of see that in the original, how the crossbars are thinner. So what did we say? I think 0.1 inches was the thickness as the base thickness. All right, let's go back to turning off face orientation. Now for the other crossbar, all we're going to do, tab into edit mode, turn off our Solidify and Subsurf. Temporarily Shift D to duplicate and SX -1 to flip that around. This might flip around our, yeah, it does. So Shift in, scaling negatively in a direction will flip your normals. So Shift in to flip that back. And then I just need to cut some edge loops, which cutting in the middle almost is perfect. So what if we try a different tool instead? If edge loops is going to match the corner topology that we have, let's use instead, I'm going to select this first and use bisect. So the knife tool, if you click and hold in the toolbar and go to bisect, one of the rare times I actually use the toolbar, and then click and drag, that will create a new line right there. Do the same thing down here. Okay, bisect only works if you have selection. There we go. And now I can go back, hit W to go back to selection, edge mode, and then I can get really, really close to that other one, to the edge of the other bar, like this. All right, if that one's getting in the way, let's hide that. And I just need to delete in the center. So I'm going to cut a new edge loop and then delete those vertices. Now I've got the cross section missing, Alt-H, and I need to cut an edge loop. E, make that really tight. There we go. All right, now this should be good to go. There we go. You've got that nice believable seam. Turn off, that's super bright blue face orientation. There you go. So you can see that looks pretty believable. But you can also see that the mesh is being stretched. So let's go ahead and add those secondary edge loops here as well. I need to wrap up modeling in the next like 10 minutes. I would like to have an hour for modeling and an hour for lighting and shading. All right, so that takes care of the frame. What comes next? Oh yeah, the upper kind of cap. Question from Omar. I didn't catch what that bisect tool did. I had never seen it. So the bisect tool, it's like if you imagine like a laser cutting through everything in its path. Bisect does that, but in a straight line. So it doesn't matter about topology. If I tab into here, for example, and you need to have everything selected, it will only cut what is selected, apparently. And so bisect, it doesn't matter the topology, it just cuts through everything like a laser. All right, so that's what bisect does. Sometimes I'll use that if I want a straight edge, but the topology doesn't allow for it. So just cutting a straight edge with bisect is the way to go. Make sure that everything is set to shade smooth. All right, we've got that. Let's move on to the cap. Again, we're going to use the same modifier stack. So I will not duplicate the crossbars because remember that one is missing the mirror modifier. So let's duplicate the frame. Shift D, tab into edit mode. And so when I say Shift D and then you see it snap back to where it originally came from, I am right clicking to cancel the transformation part of the duplicate tool, the duplication tool. So yeah, I've duplicated this. Let's rename it to be lantern. Let's call it lantern top. There's going to be a couple different pieces we need to build. Lantern top, and then I can select the same way. I just like to start by having an edge, basically. Control I, invert selection, delete everything that's not that edge. And we need to go back out. So let's use our cursor, scale outward. And it doesn't look like it goes quite as far out as our base. So that's probably good right there. Let's develop our thickness. That probably is, it's thinner than the base. So something like this maybe. And then E to extrude left till we reach that clipping value. By the way, when you see that snap to the center and not go past the center, that's because of the clipping value. If you turn that off, you can go past the horizon of symmetry, which usually causes more problems than it solves. So I will enable clipping. There we go. We've got the edge, the kind of rim of this shape, but let's turn off subsurface because that is smoothing it in a way that we don't want to see right now. So I'm still using the 3D cursor as my pivot point. I can E extrude and then immediately hit S and Shift Z. All right, so that is extruding and scaling in X and Y, but not in Z. So it's scaling to the center of the model, but not downward where the cursor is at. All right, so I'm going to be doing that a lot. All right, we're scaling it inward first, then E, S, Shift Z again. All right, this is going to, and I can move that edge up, and that creates the cap pretty easily. Move it up about like this. And maybe this original edge was a little too far in. So let's S, Shift Z, and move that out slightly. There we go. Thickness is not where we want it to be. Let's go for a 0.1 thickness. That's more like it. Now, I need to think about how this would be constructed. Right now, it's just floating in space. That's not really what we want. It's not believable. So let me E extrude the bottom, shift, or hit, and then hit S, Shift Z. All right, so we're bringing that in. And then I might just, I don't know if this is how it would be constructed, but I'm going to hit E and move it up in Z. Let me try that again. I'm going to hit E and then move it up in Z. Why is that not working? Maybe I should use instead median point. EZ. There we go. All right, so you can see that it crosses our other surface. I'm just going to bring it just below that. All right, so if we look at the cross section, it's got this kind of curly shape. That's the profile that we've created. And I think that's going to be like watertight for the sake of rendering. All right, now we just need to cut our edge loops. Or no. Okay, so this will be the first time I built it this way. There's this decorative cap to this piece, and I want to actually, up to this point, I made them all separate pieces, but now I'm going to make them one piece, make combine two pieces. All right, so this piece at the very top with a circle in it, that's going to be connected to this top. All right, so let's see, how am I going to do this? Let's S Shift Z, make it a little bit smaller. That's not working because I'm not using 3D cursor. S Shift Z, S Shift Z, E, and then move it up. There we go. And then I guess I will have to make a plane at the top. All right, so for this, let's add that circle. I'm going to cut one edge in the very middle. Go to vertex selection, hit that middle vertex, and then Shift S to snap the cursor to the selection. Remember, wherever the cursor is at, whenever I add a new object, it's going to be placed there. I want to hit Shift A in edit mode and add a circle. All right, bring up our options. Let's make this circle 8 vertices and rotate it in X 90 degrees. Also change the size way down. There we go. Holding Shift to get it about the right size. That'll be good. And I can manually scale it down a little bit more. All right, so I've added this circle. I want to remove that original vertex as well as the vertices on the other side of the horizon of symmetry. And now we can just fill using the F key, select 2 verts, and something's going wrong. Whenever you see this and you have a thickness, Solidify modifier involved, that typically means that our faces are really wonky in terms of normals. So if we enable face orientation, yeah, so we've got some faces that are reversed, some that are correct. That just happens sometimes when filling edges like that. Sometimes it almost always happens. So Shift in, I'll select everything. Now they have consistent normals. They're facing the right direction. Solidify will work properly again. All right, now I just need some holding edges so that our Subsurf Modifier works correctly. Tab into edit mode and let's make that happen. Let's see, there's got to be a better way. Let's see here. All right, this is not going to be a very clean way to do this because I've created a mesh that doesn't adhere to quad edge flow very well. So in this case, I might just use the K tool to cut exactly what I want. Well, that one I could have used a cut edge loop. Then for here, let's connect this vertex all the way down. No, I'm going to delete this face. Sorry, try and follow along. I know this is going to be a little confusing. Cut a new edge loop there. That way it cuts all the way around the underside. And then I can connect here. Whoops. Fill those in, cut another one on the bottom side. Just every edge that I want to be hardened, it'd be a little sharper, I need to have an edge on either side. So your single edges become 3, basically. That's the philosophy behind this. I don't want to remove that vertex when I dissolve the selection. E and F. All right, that looks good. Cut an edge this way. Yeah, see this, all of this down here is very quad based. They're all a bunch of rectangles. And that works very, very cleanly whenever cutting edge loops. If ever you want to just focus on this object, I'll hit the, that was the / key on the number pad, and that goes into local view, so just the object that you're currently working on or have selected. There we go. Now I should have everything with holding edges, shade smooth, enable subdivision surface. Perfect. That works. Though I might make the Solidify modifier be, oh, that is 0.5. Let's try -1. What about -0.5? That's better. That / key again will take us out of local view. I'm going to save my scene. Why not bevel that? So the reason I'm not beveling it again is because remember, the base mesh is just the one quadrant. So if we turn off all our modifiers, you can't really, I don't think you can, unless I'm missing something. Control B. Yeah, you can't bevel just the edge by itself. I can do the operation, but it doesn't give us that other edge. So that's why, in order to maintain the modifiers, if I wanted to use bevel, it would be a good idea, because I could, unless you mean the bevel modifier. But you could, of course, like apply, before I cut those holding edges, apply these modifiers and then bevel those edges. But then you're destroying your modifier stack. So there is a bevel modifier, I just never use it. I like my bevels manual, I guess. Anyway, hopefully that answered the question, Sheila. From Panboy, would there be any way to import SGV patterns and use them to cut? I believe so. I'm pretty sure you can import SVG vector data and turn it into curves that you can then use as a Boolean or something. I'm actually going to use a Boolean next to cut in this design. But yeah, I don't use SVGs too much, but I know that it's possible. Omar, you could cut the edge loops even through the circle, though the circle goes bad, and use them. Yeah, totally. The circle is what messed up all of that edge flow for cutting clean edge loops. In hindsight, maybe I should have added holding edges first and then added the circle. That would have been a more efficient way to go about it. Save the file. All right, so yeah, that design here, this kind of flowery shape, is actually going to be very easy to create. I'm going to start with a mesh in object mode, Shift A, mesh circle. That should be added. Oh, I didn't want it up there, but that's going to be fine. Going to local view. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's delete that. Shift A, mesh circle again. I want this to be high resolution, so I'm going for 32 verts. Look at that. I created a little issue. Sometimes when you go to local view, obviously delete the object and add a new one. Local view sort of reverts. Kind of strange. Anyway, now with that selected at 32 verts, I'm going to go back to local view, and we're going to just create this as, we'll start with a circle, Shift D to duplicate it, move it in Y, and this will be S. I'm going to scale it in Y to create that elongated circle. All right, just ballpark kind of the distance. You can see me copying this here. Shift D to duplicate, rotate around our cursor, and we'll go 45 degrees, hit enter. Shift R, and that will repeat that action all the way around the circle. Might as well finish it out. And then let's take that circle in the middle, Shift D to duplicate it, move it off to the side. This needs to be bigger, so we'll use median point, scale it up. Again, just kind of ballparking what I see in the design on the right. Now go back to our 3D cursor. Shift D, rotate 180. And that will create a perfectly symmetrical design. Then I can start filling in each of these faces, Alt-clicking the edge loop, and then F. Select everything, E to extrude. All right, this is going to be a Boolean cutter object. Leave local view, and we need to scale this way down. Now I want to snap it to this surface of the face. Make sure I'm looking at it oriented properly. We can do that by changing our snap to be face snapping. Where am I at? 3 o'clock. Control, but when you do face snapping, let's also align the rotation to the target. This is pretty cool. In object mode, hit G and then hold Control, And you can see that this object orients to that slope of the shape, which is perfectly what we want. Then we can kind of position this, and once we make it intersect, this is going to be a perfect Boolean object. However, it's not oriented properly. If I go to my item location, let's change the X value to 0. That centers it in the world. Maybe scale it down according to the median point. And then also you can, if I want to kind of slide it along the slope, whenever we snap that target, the local axis is aligned, is what is aligned to that slope. So if I hit G, Shift Z twice, all right, now it's aligning perfectly. G, but I should just hit G, Y, Y twice. All right, so that moves it down a little bit. That seems to match my design a little bit closer. There we go. All right, so this also goes into our utility collection. I'm going to change the display as wire and move it to the utility collection. I don't have to even see it. I know that it's placed correctly, and then when I add my Boolean modifier here, Boolean, and we'll add it to the top of the stack. So after the subsurf, it is a difference, and I don't need the color picker. I just need to choose the, I never named it correctly. That's why naming comes in handy. We'll call this Boolean cutter. All right, let's go back to that Boolean selection, Boolean cutter. And there we go. We've got our shape cut in the top of our lantern. However, with those weird normals, so the reason that shading is happening is if we go to wireframe, you've got a bunch of extreme ingons because it was a really high resolution cutter mesh in low resolution faces, and that's going to be fine as long as we correct the normals. So if we go to our object data panel, this green triangle shape, and go to normals and enable auto smooth, the default settings will have that be correct. However, I forgot to smooth the normals of the cutter object. So you see we get the faceting inside of the cut. And so if I select Boolean cutter, I need to make that visible. Right click, shade smooth, hide the utility again. Now that's smoothed in there. All right, so that was kind of a lot. How do we get it to the other side? I guess we could do an array. So on the Boolean cutter object, let's make sure, I wonder if I can do that while it's while the collection is hidden. Add an array modifier, turn off relative offset, and then choose the array spin. That did not work. Why not? Let's unhide the utility. Okay, so that's bizarre. I don't know why that's doing that. It must have something to do with the local orientations because I want it to rotate around globally, but it doesn't. I don't know. That didn't work for some reason. If anyone knows why it's not, I'm all ears. Anyway, forget it. We don't have to do that. We'll do it slightly destructively. Not really, though. I'll tab into edit mode, use our Shift-C to put our cursor back at the center, and rotate around. Set the scale. Oh, maybe that is it. Control-A, scale, array, object, array spin. You were right that the scale was not applied, which it should have been. For some reason, this does not seem to work. Funny. Do you need to apply the scale? Okay, applying the rotation would work. Let's apply the rotation. Why didn't that work? Apply the location. That's what you have to do. Okay. So that's how we get the array modifier to work. The problem with this, though, is I no longer, if I ever wanted to come back and edit this object, I no longer have those local orientations. Like if I wanted to move it up perfectly, I can't do that. I guess I could. You're seeing like my modeler OCD come through, where I'm like, I want to maintain those local orientations just in case I ever want to move this thing around, even though I could, move it Shift X, I could move it sort of. Anyway, that's going to work fine. Applying the scale and location, rotation, that's how we're going to make that array modifier work. So that's fine. We can turn off utility, and we do have the, I need to change the array number to be 4. There we go. That's going to be fine. It's simple. So I guess to try and explain where my head is at, whenever you model non-destructively, you want to maintain the editability of as many objects as you can, whereas I kind of destroyed the most intuitive editability of that Boolean cutter object by applying the location, rotation, and scale. So that's fine for this simple project, but it's good to have it in mind. If you don't have to destroy those attributes, then don't. And the way that I would not have destroyed them is simply duplicating in edit mode and rotating them around the cursor. That's how I would have done that. But anyway, getting a little too detailed about that, a little too OCD. So that detail is cut in. I just need a couple more objects for this little detail here. I really want to speed up and get to the shading and lighting. I've kind of treated this kind of very beginner friendly. So for the advanced users, I hope it's not been too boring, but Control S, and yeah, so I'm going to duplicate this, not this object. I don't want to worry about the Boolean. So let's duplicate this one again, Shift D, and let's name it Lantern Cap. Lantern Cap. Yeah, let's just call it that. Tab into edit mode and grab those 2 verts again. Shift D, duplicate up, Control I, invert selection, and delete those other verts. Am I missing any questions? Thanks for the suggestion. Who was it? Someone told me to apply those transforms. Jed, thank you. Thank you for that. You can get away with it if you parent it first to an empty and then array, I think, but not 100% sure. Yeah, I think that would work, actually, in 647. I think you're right. Funny quirk. Is auto smooth only a Blender thing, since my mind goes to, what if I had to open the model in another software? I believe so. I know that if you export a Blender model, you can enable to preserve the normals. But I'm not sure if that happens with auto smooth. It might only happen if you explicitly tell certain edges to be sharp. But yeah, within Blender, that auto smooth works only for Blender. Like if you just try and open that in another package without exporting the normals, it won't work. Yeah, you're correct, Phil, that smoothing groups, I think, is the other common term. Control S. All right, so yeah, I'm modeling this cap, which has this, it reminds me of like a fence, the top of a fence. So let's move that into position. Oh, I can't just move it. I need to scale it to the center. That's important, because if I just start moving it, it's not going to be that symmetrical. It's not going to be on the horizon of the array. All right, so let's move it up to about here. S, Shift Z. All right, now we move that. It's going to be kind of an interesting shape. All right, so let's create, move it up. What's going to be a good way to create this? E to extrude in the X-axis, turn off Solidify and Subsurf. All right, so I want to create this shape. Imagine edge loops. You have one right here on the corner. Then you have one on the center of each. Why is my line so thick? Annotations, thickness 1 pixel. So an edge, if you're imagining vertical edges that define these little loops, and then also I'll cut another one down the center. So I need 1, 2, 3 edges cut in the middle. All right, so this gives me some lines to sort of trace where we start, we actually don't, we start low. That's not right. I think I drew my lines wrong. Hold on. I did draw them wrong. So you've got one on the corner. one in the middle. And then the actual curves, it was kind of hard to see here. Oh, you just go down once and then up once. Oh, so I do only need... Why is my brain farting so hard right now? All right, I'm just going to draw it. I'm trying to think. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, let's try this again. So I'm doing one too many edges. I just need 2. Whew. All right, let's try this one last time. That's what I need. Whew. All right, so that's the shape I want. Now I just need to cut edge loops to support that. I mean, maybe I should just kind of cut these down. I'm using a lot more of the knife tool. Typically, I don't love to use the knife tool too much because it's all freehand and it's less perfect. But today I'm just letting it rip. Oh, I remember why now. Okay, so let me cut my holding edges. There we go. And I think if I cut this way... No, that's going to be fine. All right. Add thickness. We want that solidify to be 0.1. Maybe even less, actually. Let's make it go push outward. That means my faces are reversed. There we go. And then for the outer edge, let's use our cursor, E to extrude, scale outward. All right, so it has this kind of decorative lip. But it flips back upward. There we go. That looks strange. Maybe I should go even thinner. There we go. All right, so that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit higher. All right. Last but not least, we need that little cap, which I'll just use this this mesh. Shift D to duplicate. Move it to the top. Whoops. And then E, S, Shift Z, 0. I need those holding edges. I'm getting sloppy. I think I'm ready to be done modeling this thing. All right, that should be good. There we go. All right, so we are done with the modeling. Finally, I feel like that took a long time. All right, I just want to scale this back slightly. There we go. Control S. All right, so we've saved this. We're done modeling. I'm ready to import our objects, and let's save a new scene file. All right, we're going to increment up. All right, so version 1 is just the model. Version 2 is going to have the shading and lighting. And right, I guess now it's time to import the objects from the other scenes. So this includes the wooden, if we look at this, the objects I'm going to import is the candle. Let me show you where that's from in case you want to know. If you go to Modeling Realistic Characters with Blender, this is our course on cgcookie.com, and the candle live stream. So this is from like 2015, and you can see how I sculpted that. You can download the source file. I'll also post source files to this project on this live stream once we're done. But that's where, if you want to see how that was sculpted, that's where you find that. Yes, so let's file append. And I'm looking for our rehearsal number 2. From here, I'm going to grab these specific objects: candle flame, candle wax, candle base, and wooden porch append. All right, so those are coming in, and first we'll take that. Actually, is that set up correctly? We need a camera. We need a camera first. Shift A, camera. All right, so I should kind of take a step back and think about transitioning off of the modeling workflow and into the shading and lighting workflow. Take a sip of water to commemorate this transition. Right, so let's talk about the scenery and frame our perspective around it. I described it earlier on that we're going to use an HDRI to create the overall scenery. Omar, I'm going to answer your question just a second. To achieve the scenery around us, the easiest way to do that is using an HDRI image. We're going to go to HDRI Haven and find one for free. That site is amazing if you haven't heard of it. That's going to create our overall outdoor scenery. Then the porch aspect is going to be that wooden board that I imported. And the candle, you can see we already created that. Just need to apply materials. But we're going for a cool outdoor sunset with a very warm candle-centric candle light that's the center of the focus of the image. Now for this, I did a 16:9 ratio, but I also played around with a, I think it's on the stream page actually. Yeah, in the description, if you look, there's the tall version. And so I'm going to do the tall version and not the wide frame version. And anything else to think about? Not so much. I think that's it. So perspective is now framed off of modeling into lighting and shading. Let's make it happen. So I need first a camera to kind of, frame our final view. So Shift A, add camera. Going to hit 0 to look at that camera. Next, let's change the dimensions, our render dimensions from, let's do 1080 by 1600. Then I can enable, in the in panel for view, let's enable lock camera to view. And now when I orbit around the scene like normal, our camera is going to go with it. Okay, I have 2 cameras. Why? I don't know. I just need 1 camera, so let's just use this one. And I'm going to frame this about like that. I might change the camera focal length. Let's see. What if we go up to 70? Yeah, I like 70 a little bit better. Kind of has like the camera is further back and zoomed in to this. So it would also stand to reason that the depth of field would be a little bit stronger. Are you going to model the handle? Oh, I forgot about the handle. How about this? I will do the shading and lighting, and at the end, if we've got time, I'll add the handle. I mean, it's pretty simple, but I just don't want to interrupt the transition. I did forget about that, plain and simple. But I'll add that at the end if I get finished with the shading and lighting in time. Thank you for the reminder, Splat. So yeah, Omar, your question: when you worked at a studio, was there tension between the people that only demand change and the people that actually had to execute and make the changes? That's a really good question. I definitely struggled at being the one to make changes, and really, like, your input doesn't matter unless you're like a modeling supervisor, which I was not. And so you just kind of have to sit there and take it. But what frustrated me and what I started to develop this kind of skepticism about is, like, if you model it perfectly, like if you're given artwork, you model it in theory perfectly, but the director comes by and says, oh, it's good, mark it perfect. Did that director do his or her job at all? I feel like the people in power had to make changes, or else they didn't feel like they were doing their job. So it kind of bothered me to think, like, this could be perfect, but it will be changed for the sake of that being the case. And so eventually, like I would sometimes model imperfections on purpose, just so that I know they're going to find this, and I'm not blindsided by thinking I created a perfect model only to be humbled by them asking for changes. So like, you know, maybe you make the arms a little too long, and they can focus on it, and you're like, okay, good. I knew that was going to be a problem. Anyway, that's kind of a funny, you just kind of play head games. I did, at least, like when you're sitting there modeling for hours, and you just kind of wonder that stuff. I honestly, I'll sometimes do that too with clients, like in freelance gigs, which I still do fairly regularly. But yeah, for me, if I put a lot of work and heart and soul into like making this model perfect based on the art, and then I give it to someone and they critique it, I would play games with like, I don't agree, and it bothers me that you didn't think this was perfect. So whether that's probably more my fault than anything. And so to cope with that, adding in intentional mistakes that you know you have to fix lessens that blow a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just my weird head game that I play. So yeah, back to the lantern shading and lighting. We've got our camera set up, and let's see. I am going to use cycles for this, which this is one of the few projects lately I've needed to use cycles for. And I think it really came down to, if I recall correctly, transparency in Eevee is lackluster. You know, it's much more limited than in cycles. So once I have the camera aligned the way I want it, I want to be sure to disable lock camera to view. That way I can orbit around the scene and the camera stays where it's at. I can hit 0 to go in and out of the camera. And you can see by the candle, I actually oriented this properly somehow, but the candle is only finished on one side. You know, all these little dribbles that kind of drip down and then coagulate again. So I want to make sure that is facing the camera and not this. I want those details showing up. Oh, Subsurface Scatter too looks way better in Eevee, in cycles than Eevee. That was another reason. All right, so let's talk about lighting, because that's going to be the next step. Again, I'm going to make this very simple and use an HDRI. If we jump over to hdrihaven.com, I mean, you've got to be using the site. Also, I would say support the site. I mean, I use it so much that I'm a patron now, and it's just a no-brainer thing. These are CC0, meaning you can include them in commercial projects. You can use them with complete freedom. So it's a pretty amazing setup, but definitely warrants some support. But if we go to HDRI, and I want an outdoor scene, and then you also can, by category, I want to select sunset or sunrise. And the one that I selected, again, you know, I'm looking for kind of a forest pond situation. Now the HDRI, if you can't find exactly one that accommodates your purpose, you can use a similar one as the lighting and then add a billboard image of the particular background that you want to use. For this project, this one right here, the Arboretum, works quite well. So yeah, this is exactly what I want. And I've already downloaded this. But you can download it here in 1K, 2K, all the way up to 16K. Pretty incredible. Let's go back to Blender. And for the world, let's add that in. So color, environment, texture, open. And I think I have this set up to be in my texture. No, I don't. It's my own HDRI collections, CC0, HDRI Haven, Arboretum right here. All right, so if we go to rendered mode, I think I still have this set to the default Eevee, which is, yeah, we see compiling down there. So let's switch. I probably shouldn't have turned it to render mode. All right, let's go instead back to cycles. That's what we're going to be using. There we go. Scene is updated. While I'm at it, I don't want to render everything outside of the camera frame, so let's enable render region. That is in your output settings. Also, I've got a pretty good GPU, so let's switch the device to GPU compute, and this should go a lot faster now. Excellent. Oh, I forgot I've already got the shaders on there. Those came with it. Let's remove that. Build those from scratch. Okay, so in the background, I want it to orient properly so we see the part of the pond. We don't just see this kind of boring forest. So if I switch to shading, the shading workspace now, go back to 0, go back to rendered mode, and I want to change the shading context to be world. All right, this is that arboretum image we put in here. Control T. That only works if you've got your Node Wrangler tool enabled. So in add-ons, search Node Wrangler. Make sure you have that enabled. It's it's a very handy tool set for anytime you're working with nodes. Control T. Yikes. Undo that. I think I had everything selected. Yeah, I did. So just select one node, the arboretum. Control T to create the texture coordinate and mapping node. The mapping node is where you can change the Z rotation of the sphere. So an HDRI in an environment texture, it takes that image, which is specifically designed to be like an infinite sphere around the scene. Okay, so you can see that our object is just kind of floating in space. You can zoom way out, and nothing about the environment changes. But you can. It is just a sphere in space, and you can rotate that sphere. There we go. I'm used to Eevee at updating so quickly, but in here I can rotate, and in fact, maybe I should just use the shader view, material preview mode, and also use the scene world. There we go. And now I should be able to rotate it in real time. There we go. So this is the part of the image that I want to use as the background. So I'm thinking something like this. All right, that should look pretty good. All right, well, let's go back to cycles and see what that kind of light contribution to the scene does. I don't think I have any other light sources. Okay, perfect. So right now, to me, it's a little bit too bright. From Mikhail, with the head model you did with all the different layers, be a resource for CG Cookie citizens. So the plan for that is I'm going to put it on the market, the Blender market, but it will be included as a downloadable source file whenever that course goes live. All right. So it's not going to be a free resource on CG Cookie. It's going to be a market product initially. Well, it's going to be a market product, but once the course comes out, it will be included for free in that course. All right. Let's see. So yeah, the HDRI, in my opinion, is a little bit too bright. I want it to be dulled down, a little more dark, and mapping looks so different now. Oh yeah, the mapping node. It is very different. Yeah, it's actually much better. Before, pre 2.81, pre Blender 2.81, you didn't have access to these XY, like you couldn't plug in a map to these XYZ location, rotation, and scale. Now you can. So that's actually a big upgrade. Yeah, so I want to take the arboretum color and adjust it. So let's add a color RGB curves node, and I want to make this significantly. Let's first try the strength. Let's just dial the strength down to like 0.2. That darkens the image and also darkens the light contribution. So what if I want the trees to be noticeably darker. Actually, that looks pretty good. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's start there. Let's leave that. And now we can add the light for the lamp, which I'm going to do with a point light. Shift A, light, point light. We can move that up just to above. We're within the lantern, above the candle. All right, this one needs to be a bright orange. I'm going to make it like completely saturated. Take the wattage down though. Like, let's go like 2 watts. That doesn't look too bad. Maybe it's still, maybe 1 watt. Can we get a scientific, can someone Google the wattage of a candle flame and tell me what that is? Omar, did you use real life reference to make that realistic layer head? No, I didn't. The head layer, the skin layer came from it started as that realistic character course on CG Cookie. I just chopped off the head and made it work for this, kind of polished it off. But like the textures were hand painted, all the muscle layers and skull, all of that was hand painted, hand sculpted. yeah, it was the first time I did hand painted textures, which was not as hard as I thought it would be. But anyway, I'm going to teach all about the texturing and sculpting of the face in the course. I'm really excited about it. Maybe I'll check it myself. I'm going to look for the wattage of a candle flame. Oh, it looks like we got some help. Thank you. Let me put this over here. Well, this is interesting. I'm just looking for like a very low. Most of that 80 watt is actually given out as 80 watt light bulb. I'm not seeing the candle, but I'm also just zooming through this. How many watts is a burning candle? Answer. 0.5% off. Am I missing just the answer? There's no way 80. So 80 watts is the bulb. Oh, okay. The candle was burning 0.02 of a gram each second, which gives us about 80 watts. Only about 0.5% of the energy. Most of the stuff coming off is heat. So 0.5 of the energy. So does that mean I can do 80 watt times 0.05 times 0.05? Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. All right, so let's see here. 80. This is cool too. If you're new to Blender, you can type in formulas into a field, an integer field. This is actually probably a float field, and a float property. So 80 times 0.05 gives us 4 watts. Nice. Look at that. We looked it up, and I was definitely using an underpowered bulb, a lower powered light than I originally in the original R&D project. All right, so we've got the candle wattage, and thank you, Jake, for the. Still need to divide by 100. Did I do point? What did I do? 0.05. Oh, you're right. You're right. I see what you mean. So 80 times 0.005, right? Yeah. Thank you for the math checks. That is pretty low. 400 milliwatts. Double check my math that adding another 0.005 is correct. Because that's pretty underpowered. I might increase that a little bit. Let's leave it as it is, because this is going to be 2 parts. The first part is actually a point light, as you can see. The next part is going to be the flame itself. So let's add a material to that flame. Call it candle flame. And this is going to be, let's switch back to the material context. 80 divided by 100 times 0.05. 80 divided by 100. So let's see here. 80 divided by 100 times 0.05. 40 milliwatts? Is that right? A candle gives off more light than that. I feel like Neil deGrasse Tyson would have left for accuracy's sake a while ago. That just does not seem right. Okay, this is where I am happy to throw science out the window and do what feels right. I like it as a guide, but to me, this is a candle definitely has to give off more light than this. What happens if we turn the strength of the world all the way off? I mean, maybe a candle gives that off. I don't know. I'm gonna take artistic license here to contribute more energy to the scene. I like that 400 milliwatts better, but even still, yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see. Maybe one watt. We'll start there. And so for that, the candle, I want to use not a principled shader, but instead, whoops. Note, I try, whenever you're using cycles, undoing can be kind of a scary thing. You can see that the render restarted and stuff. Sometimes it has crashed on me, but I try to avoid undoing when doing nodes. Undoing when working with nodes. Just a pro tip. I want to only delete the principled BSDF with Control X, Shift A, add a shader, emission shader. All right, so this needs to be, I don't know, like 100. But this is the other component, and this is also where accuracy kind of takes a back seat, because I do want this candle to be, the actual flame to be emitting light as well. So they're going to have to balance each other, the flame and the point light that we created. Let's see. To actually create the candle flame coloration, let me show you what I'm talking about. So yeah, you can see that it's actually opposite of what I kind of thought. Let's create something like this. All right, so it's sort of bluish at the bottom. It turns to orange and then turns to white. I kind of thought it was the other way around. I guess that means that the hottest part of the flame is right there. So I'm going to recreate that using a texture gradient texture. All right, Control T to provide some texture coordinates. I want to use the object, object into the vector, and make sure that my object origin, where's the object origin? I'm just going to object set origin to geometry to make sure that's at the center. Why don't I see the origin? Huh, I must have turned that off somehow. All right, so that is at the center, and then when I use the object texture coordinates, that's going to be the center of those texture coordinates. So now when I change the gradient to be spherical, let's go back to rendered view, holding Z and moving my mouse up to rendered. All right, now we're going to get that sphere. If I change the scale, let's see. Oh no. How big does this thing have to be? There we go. So I had to change the scale to 100. That's pretty crazy. All right, so this is the sphere. It takes a gradient, basically a circle of a gradient where it's brightest in the middle and then it turns to black. So I want to scale this up so that we have a gradient. Whoops. We have a gradient from top to bottom, all right? And then once I've got that, which can be a little awkward when dealing with shader nodes, but I put the origin there, and then I knew that scale, eventually the right scale would bring that sphere down into view. All right, so I need to add a converter color ramp. And we're going to, I actually need it to be bigger. So right now I've got the black color from top to bottom, but I want the center to be up. All right, so let me change the scale down to like 20, maybe 30, and then move the location in Z up a little bit. All right, I should start to see, there we go. So I want white at the very top and black at the very bottom. There we go. That should give me what I want. This way we can take the black flag and make it slightly blue. Add another flag by control clicking and making this a bright orange. And then at the very top is white. Maybe I'll change the linear to B-spline. There we go. All right, now when I plug this into our emission, maybe, oof. Maybe I shouldn't have used B-spline. Anyway, when I go to, how about 10? Maybe we'll start with that. Compositing is going to come in handy here because we're going to use the glow effect, like the, what do you call it? The fog glow. Maybe we should go ahead and set that up so you see what I mean. Might as well. Why not? So we will render this scene. I'm going to change the performance tiles to 128. Typically, you set those higher with GPU, so you have fewer tiles. And we have GPU compute. How about the, we'll just leave the other settings as is. Other than the output, let's make it half the resolution, 50. Render image. Here we are back at the Stone Age. Oh gosh, look at that. So those are all of our utility objects being rendered tragically in this scene. So instead of just turning off the utility visibility, we need to change how it's rendered, and we want to turn renderability off completely, which is the camera icon. Let's try that one more time. He said cycles crashes when you change. Definitely save. Definitely save. What just happened to that? There we go. All right, so that is the render in its raw form, but let's go ahead and add some compositing node magic. Really just the one, because I want to have a feeling for what this node will do, because it also deals with how strong the light sources are. So let's add a filter glare node. Also, where is my backdrop? Oh, I need a viewer node. Output viewer. Shift right click and drag will add a reroute node there. There we go. All right, so now you can see that if I change the glare mixture up to 1, you can see what light values it captures and decides to blur. Now we're using streaks. Let's go to fog glow instead. So it's using a little bit of the sky, the brightest parts of the sky, but also the candle flame is the other brightest part. So we can, if we take that threshold up to like 2, now we only have the flame. And if we take that mix back down to 0, that will be the combination. And yeah, it's a little too white. I wonder if it's just too strong. Let's go back to shading. Take that emission strength down to like 5. Let's see what that does. But it is kind of important for the composition that the candle flame is an appropriate strength. Okay, that does look better color-wise. Let's see, how big can we go? What was I doing? Oh yeah, I want to change the mix up to 1 so I can see just what's being blurred. Taking the amount down, the strength of the candle flame down, I need to take the threshold down as well. So maybe like 1.2. All right, looks like I'm going to get a little bit of the sky. That's okay. It's okay. I'm fine getting a little bit of that into the blur mix at 0. There we go. A nice subtle blur on the flame. You can see that before and after. Blur, it's a glow rather. It kind of adds to the heat feeling. All right, let's transition off of the flame. Let's look at the candle itself, the wax. This should be a really easy shader to put together. It's really just going to be a question from Mikhail. I noticed that 64 tiles actually gives me faster render with GPU. Used to be around 512. Interesting, really. I'll have to test that. I don't know what would change to make 64. Maybe 64 is fine. I usually would use like 32 for CPU and then use 128 for GPU, but maybe splitting the difference into 64 makes sense. Maybe I'll do that for the next render. Let's see, render, view render, slot 2, and when we do that, it'll be 64. And yeah, so the candle flame, candle wax itself. Let's add a new material, call it candle_wax. All right, so this, I really should just have to take the subsurface and like put it to 0.1. Also, I highly recommend random walk. I think it takes a little bit longer to render, but random walk is such a better algorithm for subsurface scatter. I mean, so much better. Also, the subsurface radius. Right now, the default is kind of set where if you imagine these numbers and you've never used subsurface, well, I should maybe back up. Subsurface is a technical term for subsurface scatter is the technical term for how light passes into an object and bounces around. So human skin, wax, cheese, like translucent type materials. Subsurface scatter is the most scientifically accurate way to achieve that. And so this subsurface radius has 3 values for red, green, and blue, and it allows you to change the value for when light passes through. The color of that pass through changes. So with humans, you get this kind of higher red value, lower green and blue, so that you get that kind of blood red subsurface. But for a candle, there's not blood under the surface, so we can just change all of these values to 1, and it's like pure light color traveling through. And I think maybe 0.05 is we'll try that value. This is also going to be much more translucent than skin. Let's try this. Let's see how this ends up working out. And let's render the image. I guess this is not a fair comparison, Mikhail, because we added that subsurface element, so that's going to take longer to render. But let's say even with that, 11 seconds versus 10 seconds. Yeah, I don't know. They're very close. They're very close. I could see how maybe 64 could be a little faster. That's looking... in terms of subsurface, I think that looks pretty decent for wax. I mean, this is not a complex material. It's very, very straightforward. I think that's good. Let's move on because we're also running out of time. We got 10 minutes left. Okay, so let's talk about the lantern itself. Can I select all the objects? I don't want the camera in here. Candle, wax. Let's add... forget it. I think I just need everything but the candle, wax, and flame. All right, so I'm going to Control select all these things. Are those all my objects? Yes. So these objects all need a material called lantern paint. Lantern paint, we'll call it. Okay, so the big thing I want to do here is add scratches to the edges. Let's see, I missed Omar's question. Is the shader of the lamp white? In the render below, it looks blue. Is the shader of the lamp white? The shader of the lamp. Let's see. So the bottom of the flame I did make blue because we saw that in the reference. Where is that? Right here, I was trying to mimic this situation. Oh, you know what? Man, I could spend so much longer. I did not use my time perfectly this stream. I could spend a lot more time on that flame and a lot of things, but I'm going to have to move on. You can now shift and select top to bottom in the outliner. Yes, you can, definitely. Oh, I see what you mean. So I could have shift, let's see, control click that. No. This, control click, and then shift click down here. But it did deselect the top candle base. I don't know why it did that. Let's go back to shading, and I'm creating the material here. Okay, lantern paint, that's right. Okay, the big attribute that I want to adjust is adding some scratches to the surface of the metal frame. So we can add an input geometry node. This is pretty classic. You've seen me do this several times if you've watched much of my shading training before with like Shader Forge and stuff. But I want to create a converter color ramp. You can create this, you can isolate the edges, the hard edges, using the pointiness node of the geometry node. So if we shift control, click on that, go to rendered. Note that the pointiness only works with Eevee. It does not work with, I'm sorry, it only works with cycles. It does not work with Eevee. Nuts. I meant to add that shader while I had it all selected. Oh, okay. Control L, make links to materials. Now everything should have this same material. All the lantern pieces, I mean. Excellent. All right. So here we can crush these values. All right, so now we've got white highlighting on the edges of our lantern. And then when I overlay this with a scratch texture, then we're going to get a nice believable scratch pattern. So when it comes to a scratch texture, there's HDRI Haven, but also Texture Haven. And here we can find, let's see, browse textures. Also the same situation, it's all CC0 textures. Excellent suite of websites. I highly recommend using them, and then recommend thinking about supporting them as well. So in the plaster section, there's no real like grime scratchy textures yet, but this white rough plaster should work pretty well. Like this pattern should serve the purpose quite well. So I've already downloaded that. And if I import that now, which I guess we can do with this little browser, I rarely use this thing. But if we go up to texture, this right here, white rough, and we can just click and drag in here. All right, let's make sure that our texture is oriented properly, which it doesn't look like it is. Control T, let's use object, and also change the, what is this called? The texture vector to box. All right, so now we've got our texture applied. We can also use the blend. Let's set that to 0.5. You can see what that does right here on the edge. If we turn that down to 0 and then turn it back up to, you see a very harsh edge right there, but if we turn it up to 0.5, it smooths it out. It's just helps to not make it so, what's the word I'm looking for? Not to make the seams not so noticeable. As far as the scale, I think I need to shrink it a little bit. So I've changed the value up to 2. Maybe I should even go up higher, like 4. Okay, so let's use this now to overlay it. Color mix, RGB. And change the method to overlay. There we go. So you can see we've started scratching the surface, although I can, of course, adjust this. Shift A, converter color ramp. Because I might want to invert it. Flip color ramp direction. There we go, yeah. This way it makes the scratches less, it breaks up the scratches a little bit more. That's going to look pretty good, I think. So this becomes our edge scratch texture, and I'm going to use it first as a factor. So whenever if you imagine this object in reality, it starts as a metal, raw metal piece, and then they paint it white. So there's kind of 2 layers, the metal layer and then the paint layer. I'm going to do the same kind of idea, and even though you can accomplish this in one material node or in one principled BSDF node, I'm going to use 2 and change this to be turn specular all the way off and metallic all the way up. All right, that way I've got the 2 layers separated, and then I can use a simple shader, mix shader, to blend between them. And this factor, meaning white will be the metal and black will be the white paint. All right, so the metal goes in the second slot because that is what is white in this factor. And now, just to test this, let's go ahead and make the paint like a dark red so we can see exactly what's happening. All right, so it looks like I might need to increase, let's see. The metal is still fairly subtle, so I can try to take a converter color ramp again. I'm going to go over time and crush the values a bit. All right, the higher or the further you bring down the white, the more the metal is going to show through. That looks pretty good. And you know, this is also as an artist where you can decide like how beat up is this lantern. I think that looks pretty good right there. We'll change the base color back to white, basically just turning saturation all the way down. All right, and you can, in the render, you know, it's going to be more subtle. Let me render a new image. View render, switch to slot 3 so you can see before and after. And yeah, it is pretty subtle, but I like it subtle. I don't want this thing to look like it's been beaten up with a hammer or, you know, scratched with sandpaper, but just to have a little bit of imperfection and age in it. If we go Alt-H. Does that not work anymore? Or is it J? I thought there used to be a hotkey for this. There it is. Alt-J. All right, so go to slot 3. Alt-J. All right, you can see on the edges just slightly. All right, so there is a little bit of age, wear and tear on the edges, but the second component of this is going to be using this as a bump map. All right, so we'll take the black and white, add a vector bump. That black and white map goes in to the height value. Add a reroute node so you can just see that a little more clearly. It's pretty janky. And I need to invert the strength because white in a bump map context, white means poking out and black means in. So we need to invert it so that the white actually cuts into the paint. All right, that should be good. We needed a pretty low strength. Like, let's try 0.1 first. Plug it into both BSDFs, the normal socket and the normal socket, both BSDFs. Shift Control click on that. And when the bump map gets involved, it makes the effect much more noticeable. Let's look down here. Let's try 0.5. Yeah, you can see that that's really starting to beat up the edges quite noticeably. There we go. That is what I want. Not too bad. All right, so we've got a paint material. Is there any other materials to really polish? Maybe not. In the next few minutes, I can go over the compositing, perhaps. Let's save the scene. So Jake was saying, no, he's talking about the lantern. It's a little bit blue due to compositing. Yes. Oh, right. So that's what we'll get to next. In the compositing, I'm going to render this image. Let's enable some denoising, and I will also make the samples. I'll take the samples up to like 512. Let's do 256 and render. So yes, once we get into compositing, you'll see like I'm going to exaggerate the blue values in the dark registers of the image, and then increase the orangishness in the bright areas. Again, to just push that kind of, I don't know, Instagram filtery type look. All right, so we've got the raw render. We've got a little bit of compositing, adding the glow to the flame. Let's just run through a quick compositing session. Again, if you've watched much of this, I don't change too much of my compositing regimen, especially for realism. We're going to have a vignette element. We're going to tweak the tonal values, add some noise. So this is all pretty standard stuff that I do regularly. But it's always kind of the closure part of the rendering process. So I will, what was I going to do first? I guess let me first adjust the color balance. All right, I love to use this node lately. So for the lift, let me switch it to the blue color. You'll start to see the whole image go a little bit blue. Just trying to cool off the image a little bit, at least the dark parts. You can also adjust like how dark the overall image is. I find that adjusting these more subtly creates a pretty effective. You don't want to look like, when people overdo the Instagram filters. We don't want to do that. We just want to nudge them in a more artistic direction. And then for the gain, I like to make that a little more in the red direction. Let's see, maybe what I should do is split this off, and turn off the backdrop for this. Image editor and change to viewer node. There we go. Now I can just see the image by itself, the output, and change at will. Okay, so before and after, it's pretty subtle, but the trees, you can especially see that the darkness turns more blue. And I think that this is that kind of, at this point, it's sort of stereotypical, but you've got that really blue cool light, really bright red, orangish key light sort of situation. So that's kind of what I'm going for. It fits the theme. And then let's add a vignette, which with this one, I'm going to add a matte box mask. Shift Control click on that. Node Wrangler does work in compositing, and I'm going to drag this out to kind of frame the image. Shift A, filter blur, change it to fast Gaussian. Change the X and Y value to 100. All right, that's just going to kind of blur out. Some people like the more rounded vignettes. In this case, I kind of like it being square because it gives it sort of an older photograph feel too. And I'm going to actually add that before the color balance. So let's add Shift A, color mix. And let's try overlay first. All right, so before, after, that actually has a huge effect. That's kind of overdoing the Instagram stuff. So let's go down to like 0.6. And overall, it sort of brightens the image maybe a little too much. So how about we take the gamma down? Or maybe the gain. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. And finally, I will add a little bit of grain, film grain, with an input texture. And let's add that texture, which is kind of weird how this works out. So I just have to go to the texture panel over here, and it will add a texture to the brush, like your sculpting and texture brush system. But I don't know why the texture node doesn't come up as the context, but the context only allows for brushes by default. So I don't know if they'll change that, but I'm going to call it film grain. And I can easily grab that film grain over here. And it's going to be a type of clouds, which is a color cloud. It's basically a noise pattern with colors. And then 0.001, I believe. Let's color mix and change the mixture to overlay again. Take the color value. All right, so now when we zoom in, you can see that we've got film grain. It's a little too strong, so let's take it down to 0.5. See what that looks like by itself. I think we're going to call that done. I'm over time, and yeah, I kind of went a little slower than I meant to for the modeling, but so I think it's about time to wrap this project up. But this could definitely be polished a bit more in terms of being like completely photorealistic. In one way, I think the paint on the lantern is not reflective as much as I want. We could, I guess, make that change real quick, which is this one right here. So change the specular down to like 0.1 and the roughness down to maybe 0.12, 0.1 as well. Yeah, I did want this to have a bit more of a glossier type look. How about 0.2? I just couldn't resist making one more tweak. But yeah, that's going to pretty much be it for the stream. Thanks for watching. I hope it was somewhat educational. I know for the more advanced people, maybe there wasn't as much to chew on, but more aimed towards beginners and intermediates. But thank you for joining me. I will see you in December. And anything else I want to say? Just keep an eye out on the live stream schedule. How does that look before and after first? Okay, yeah, you can see that it's much more reflective. I think that just adds a little bit more dimension, even though they certainly make matte painted lanterns, I'm sure. But yeah, keep an eye out on the live stream schedule for new events. I need to add another one for January soon. But also check out, of course, check out Lampel's new course if you haven't seen it. The trailer is so cool. If you're not interested, watch the trailer, and I would be surprised if you weren't interested. But check out animating first-person character weapons in Blender. This kind of completes a series of sci-fi weapons that Lampel has worked on. So yeah, it's a big course. Definitely check that out. And that's going to be all. Thank you so much again. I will see you in December. Happy blending, and have a good rest of your Tuesday. Goodbye.